Welcome to Design Voices Elevated, the video series featuring women design leaders. I've selected 10 stories to provide a nuanced perspective of how leaders are using design to grow meaningful change in organizations. I'm Marzia Argo and I'm going to be your host. This is episode number 6 featuring Emma Sandberg. Emma, tell us about you.
Hello, very nice to meet you and to be here. So Emma Sandberg, currently design director at Philips. I have been here 12 years, left Sweden, where I'm originally from, when I was 19, studied in the UK, lived and worked in China for 10 years, and then joined back in Europe 8 years ago.
Nice. What about your current role? What are you doing right now?
So in my current role, which is quite new, about 3 months, we have had a reorg at Philips, and I'm part of the XD Central Leadership team. My team is very much focusing on the hardware platform, things like CMF development, material development, brand licensing, everything that touches the physical products.
And how is design organized at Philips? Do you have a central or decentralized function? How does that work?
So, in this reorg this year, we have actually changed quite a lot. So, out of 400 designers globally, 150 roughly sitting in XD Central. So that's the part that I'm also orchestrating or part of orchestrating. And then 300 designers are sitting in the businesses. So we have 18 businesses all over the world, both in the health system, or the medical side, and then consumer products like personal health, mother and child care, or healthcare, and so on.
With this number of designers, how do you ensure consistency of the work across? I guess is not an easy task across different business units, but also I guess disciplines, right? I imagine you have UX strategy, surveys.
Yeah. So to the point is why we have the kind of the center of excellence and the central design team, and we are basically working as servants to the businesses, and we do have everything from data, AI, usability, digital DLS, the hardware platform, all of these kind of pieces of the pie that really creates the great total experience.
Okay, so abstracting now from your role, I would like to talk about design at large, and I would like to understand what is design for you and whether that idea about design changed over time, over the course of your career.
Like I mentioned, I have been in the industry roughly 20 years. It definitely have changed a lot. I think we had a peak around design thinking in the mid 2000s. There was very much focus sort of on the kind of craft and the developing the industry of industrial design, as my profession is originally, and then it sort of shifted to become kind of common standards to work around co-creation and ideating, and I think also questioning what is actually design, what is a role in an organization, what is it that we actually do, and I think that question has become more and more blurred where we are today. Of course, the world has changed tremendously with the Internet of Things, and how software has really kind of taken a huge part of design as well, and it's now more about I think orchestrating the full experience, so all of the touch points, and really understand I think the pain points of each user, to really kind of have empathy for what is the surgeon's pain points, or somebody who is an older person, or whatever it is, that we really kind of put ourselves in that person's shoes and design backwards sort of around that.
And what do you think is design, or specifically probably strategic design, important for organizations? Why should organizations invest in it? What's the benefit?
So I think design strategy is a little bit on the blurry line of business and design, and it's very much the impact and the purpose as a company actually has. And I think designers, we have the kind of the unique ability to look at the world a little bit differently, and really think about this again, back to empathy and the user, and what is it that we can do to be unique as a company. So also looking at competitors, the kind of advantage that we would put forward, but also in terms of inspiration. So if we're looking at creating a new, mission and vision for the company, it's all about also inspiring both employees, the outside world. What is the kind of the purpose of Philips in this world?
I find this very interesting, actually, when the organization or the purpose of an organization becomes the object of design, right? And what did you learn in this process? What would be like an advice that you would give to a peer trying to do that for the first time, to actually elevate design from the design of services and products to the design of how an organization works, thinks, organizes itself?
So I don't have the full answer yet.
No one does.
I'm also in the process of understand and explore. So what I find, I'm also currently doing an MBA at the site. So what I find it is about talking the same language as your stakeholders, especially in a big matrix organization, quite corporate. If you want design to have a kind of a seat at the table, I think you do need to understand the other perspective. So I think it's very easy, people that don't understand design, to put it in a bucket to kind of that we beautify the world. And I think this is kind of really a pitfall that we need to kind of constantly fight to kind of wash that away a bit, that reputation, to actually really have a seat at the table and make an impact, and have our kind of voice heard. And I think that we need to keep on kind of advocating and sort of fighting for it. So it's a bit, in a way, I think you also need to kind of walk the walk, and just, keep on kind of pushing for it.
How do you articulate the value of design today? What are the things that you find working when, telling this story?
So for me, I think you need to be concrete enough, and you need to give people something that they can, that resonates, right? That really feels sort of impactful, right? So I think for us, it's all about breaking down the complexity to making it more simple and sort of essential. It's all about unifying design language system touch points. It's all about, how do we, for us, it's all about also the care, for example, and how do every single product, software interaction speaking the same language. It's also about getting the organization on the same level so that everyone, even the newcomers and the more seniors, have the same common understanding. It's also very important.
How do you do that?
So I think to do that, you need this center of excellence.
Right.
And you need to constantly also involve everyone in the conversation. So I think it's a partly bottom up, but people also need the leaders to sort of set the standards and say, this is where we're going. But be humble in terms of how do you assess it? How do you check that this is the right track? And really listen. I think active listening is very important.
Okay, so you're mentioning the role of the leader is one, setting a vision, or setting a sense of direction. What else? What's leadership to you?
So for me, it's about being authentic. I think also as a female leader, we also have a responsibility, I think, to show other women or younger women that you can be yourself. And you don't have to try to become, the stereotypical leader, like white male, strong, dominant. I think you can afford to just be yourself and believe in what you think is the core values, and to kind of stick to that. I think leadership is also about enabling and kind of endorsing people that you think are doing the right things, and to kind of advocate for things that are really important to you.
What you said, I think, is very important. I do a lot of coaching to design practitioners, and I have quite a number of women coming to me saying, hey, I have no role model for leadership that is not a white male in his 50s. And, nothing bad about white men in their 50s, but, they generally have a very, specific way of going about leading an organization and people. And that's not necessarily the kind of way that clicks with everyone.
No.
So what would you tell to these young women in organizations that are struggling to find an alternative model, how to go about finding their own way of leading?
I think that it's almost like if I could tell the younger myself, I would also not necessarily listen to the noise, because they are going to be, stereotypical people that would kind of make you feel maybe your voice is not as important, or, and I think a part of it is to just ignore it, to be honest. And I think that you can find role models. You can definitely find it in 50-year-old white men. It's more their mentality and the way they go about it. So gender is not always, the only thing that can be a deal breaker. And I think that you can also really believe in yourself. And I think with the time, you also kind of realize like your impact actually, can be bigger than you think. And also to support not only, to peers around you. So if you're a younger woman, really support your other female peers.
So you can be a leader basically at any point in your career. What's one thing that changed everything for you in your career, you think?
It's very hard to pinpoint one.
Okay, two.
I think it is actually more about incremental steps, and also kind of give yourself, a bit of a break. So every time you make kind of a step, you need to kind of acknowledge that, and then being able to assess where am I going to go next. And one thing is really leading to the other. I think it's very hard to look at, when you're 20, this is where I'm going to be when I'm 50. And I think also to embrace the unknown. For me, for example, moving to China and leaving everything was quite a big deal, and I was definitely not quite sure I could do it. But then I think once you kind of just give it a go and try it out, and the worst thing that can happen is that you go back to where you were, which is not so bad.
It's not so bad. I would like to go back to the concept of leadership that we discussed before, and I would like to understand what kind of leader are you personally? What do you think is your leadership style?
So for me, somebody told me the first time I was leading a team, I was 26, I was in Shanghai, I was very young, and my boss at the time told me, a great leader creates leaders, which I still very much, I haven't found a better saying since, and I still think that is so powerful. So by that, giving your team the freedom, also to really try to listen to them, what is also making them excited and engaged and motivated to do their job. Try to empower people, try to maybe nudge them a bit, to push them a little bit, and then of course to unify the team, right? So that's very much what I'm doing. And at the same time, I think as a leader you need to kind of walk the walk, You need to show like this is the right. There's a lot about ethics, like the rights, the do's and the don'ts. But I think you need to really allow for different personalities and different being very inclusive. And yeah, again, active listening I think is really powerful.
Is there anything that you regret in your career?
Only one again?
Okay, a few.
I think you make mistakes all the time, and you also learn from that, and then that's how you grow and become better next time. I've definitely probably stayed too long in positions or too long in a job, too long in a country, maybe.
But do you regret it today? Or was it part of the learning process and it's just a learning?
Probably the latter.
Yeah.
That I also learned that is a pitfall that I have, that I need to maybe face reality and really ask myself, do I still want this right now, and or maybe is it time to change?
But so what's the regret then?
Well, I think you make choices in life that take you to certain places, and that's great, but there's always a sacrifice. So in my case, I've been 20 years away from my parents, and now they are not that as young anymore, and you have to live with that. So you take a decision to leave maybe your motherland, and that will have a consequence, and you have to kind of live with it.
Yeah, I relate to that very much. Yes. What about learnings? What is the top 3 things that you learned, that you really treasure, that you really carry with you?
So I think I learned to I'm still learning to believe that I'm good enough. I've definitely learned to be patient. I've also learned to to believe that I can do better.
I'm really interested in the first one because I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with, believing that I'm good enough and then, I'm here because I deserve it. How do you do that? How do you work on that?
It's a constant, and also you will always be challenged from outside. There's always going to be some noise that maybe it's a competitive environment, right? And you need at the same time prove yourself to gain respect and deserve to be where you are. At the same time, you need to just claim it. I think I maybe could have been more bold. I wish sometimes I was more, maybe male in that way and just kind of claiming my space. And but it's also not my personality. So, be authentic to who you really are. That's
quite difficult kind of balance to strike, I guess.
Yeah.
Because you operate in a context that just values other attributes. Like being loud and being bold and being,
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. What do you think must happen now for design and for the design community? What's the one hope that you have for the future, or at least the one thing that you're working towards?
So we have, I think, an interesting conversation going on. For example, is design thinking dead? And
everyone is talking about that.
Everyone is talking about that. Another one, Gen AI. How is that going to affect everyone's profession? And I think that these are kind of crises in the industry. Probably the first time in 20 years. I mean, there's been constant changes and technology has moved crazy over these years. But I think right now it's really a bit of an identity crisis. And you see how people are holding on to the past and others are immediately jumping on something new just to kind of not be redundant in their thinking. I think this would take probably a decade before we have figured out.
But what's your hunch? Like, what do you think? What's your hope, Alice? Like, what would you hope would happen at the end of this transition?
So I think hopefully we are gonna adapt to the crisis of society and be able to support and really drive very important societal questions that we have. And I'm hoping that design will reinvent itself to be very meaningful in that process and to drive those changes almost ruthlessly, whatever it requires. And I think it means a lot of people are probably gonna, not be on board with that. There will be new functions, roles, all these things come into play. And it will just, I think it's going to challenge us in so many levels.
Yeah.
And we just have to keep on being open-minded for it. And
Yeah. You mentioned before that you're doing an MBA.
Yep.
Why did you choose to do that?
I think partly it is about, the feeling that design not always, automatically have a seat at the table. And I wanted to understand a bit the other side of it. I firmly believe that everything that we do needs to really make an impact and drive value. You need to understand the business context.
Yeah.
Let's take sustainability as an example. It doesn't matter how many amazing concepts you have, unless you have a good business case, it's just not going to make it. And then the impact is zero. So I think partly to be able to drive those initiatives a bit stronger, having a bit more holistic view on how, things work. I'm also personally a bit more kind of a T-shaped designer.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of just, looking even outside of design and try to understand, strategy and, other parts of organizations that are really driving impact.
Well, Emma, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And for sharing your story.
It's been great.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your network. And if you would like to follow and support my work, please subscribe at designmavericks.substack.com. See you next week.